aligning your business to SDGs, UN SDGs, and unlocking funding. So let me share with you who we have on here. We have incredible speakers, guys. We have Najla from Circular. She does a lot of work in circular economy. And guys, I want to tell you, Najla, I can proudly say, sits on the GLEAC cap table, and she started off as an engineer with Aramco in Saudi. She's one of those trailblazing women. You know, super, super excited to have her. We have Federico Grossi, who again, in this space, doing incredible work with GLEAC Capital. They fund a lot of these circular economy, SDG, ESG type of projects. And we have Tushar of Dalberg. And if you guys look at Dalberg, they're doing really incredible work out there in the impact space. So I'm going to start by asking a question to all three of them before Najla and Federico will do a very quick 10 minutes, and then we are going to go into a breakout room. So we know we have these 17 SDGs. I'm going to ask our guest speakers a question. Are all of the SDGs equally important? And if not, which one is the most important one to you and why? It's kind of like a trick question, right? I am going to ask Tushar, you're up first.
Thanks. Really, really glad to be here and good to see everyone. I also caught the last part of the previous discussion and really excited by that, and I hope to have a great conversation with everyone now as well. Okay. Wasn't expecting that question, so but
hold on, it's a surprise question where I put you guys on the spot right away. Choose your SDG if there is one more important, and why.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want to say that there is one that is more important than the other. I think all of them have their own space and then are important depending upon where you are, right? For people who live in coastal communities, life below water, for example, becomes more important. Not to say that it's not important elsewhere, but if I were to pick one that I think for me is the one that is sort of a touchstone for me, and the one that I end up thinking a lot about, and which I feel is the one which actually helps set up success in all of the others, then that would be SDG 16, which is peace, justice, and strong institutions. Strong believer, I'm a really strong believer in governance, and a very strong believer that having good quality governance, having good property rights, having law and order are essential before we can really talk about sustainable development. Without having some of these essential elements, it becomes very, very difficult to sustainably provide developmental outcomes. There can always be short-term outcomes which can come about. However, will those last forever is a question which largely depends upon whether there are the right institutions in place for that particular region or not. So that's the one that's my favorite.
Okay, so you do have a favorite. You do have a favorite.
Yes.
Okay, and what about you, Najla?
Okay, so I do not have a favorite. I think that all of them, they're all integrated and interrelated, and each one of them, Tushar mentioned, depending on where you are globally and where you are as a company, you're going to be able to go ahead and contribute to one over the other more easily initially, and then hopefully get on board with the rest of them. I personally don't have a favorite. They're all encompassing to address the issues of people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships. I will just say that one that I think we should focus on a lot is partnerships, Goal 17.
Okay.
It facilitates the rest of them.
Okay, Federico, what about you? Do you have a favorite?
I have a favorite, but I have to say that Tushar almost convinced me to change my mind.
There you go, Tushar.
Yeah.
Yes, let's go.
No, my favorite is, and maybe I biased because of my work, but it's number 13, so related to climate change. As for me, climate change touches so many points and if we miss that point, then many of the other topics doesn't make sense to touch based on, because we would lose so much in terms of biodiversity and human population and the civilization. So I think that's definitely my favorite. But I'll think about further about 16.
Okay. All right. All right. So with that note that we got a little taste of who's our panelists, let's have Najla, why don't you start in terms of your presentation? So let me give you guys the format. Najla will go for about 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes. Federico is going to go for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to come back to panel discussions. And Tushar, you get to jump in all of those discussions and breakout room. So can we, Najla, are you able to share? Jawad or Naima, can we have Najla be a co-host, please, so she can share her presentation?
Eliane, I want to revise my response to say goal 5, which is the
Oh,
gender
what
equality.
is this? What
Gender equality.
All right, are you able to share? Yes.
Share screen. Host disabled participants screen sharing.
Najla is a co-host now. Why don't you try right now? And also Federico, let's make him a co-host, please.
Okay.
Perfect. There we go.
Okay.
Cool.
And I need to minimize that. All right, guys. So thanks for having me. Very excited to talk. I'm gonna get right into it because Eliane's giving me only 10 to 15 minutes. So the UN SDGs were created to achieve a prosperous, inclusive, and sustainable society for all by 2030. The action areas for the UN SDGs are people, planet, prosperity, peace, and partnerships, which cover the 3 dimensions of sustainable development, economic, social, and environmental. There are 17 goals and 169 targets to address global challenges, such as combating poverty and hunger, inequality and injustice, creating sustainable cities and communities, and climate change. And the goals are all integrated and interrelated. So what is the role of business in achieving these goals? The global community is facing a challenging task to transition towards a sustainable future. And businesses are at the heart of achieving any widespread improvements by aligning their vision and core activities with the SDGs, driving innovation and setting best practices across their value chains. The SDGs provide a universal framework for businesses to set ESG targets and take actions, engage with stakeholders, and communicate performance. They also drive change across the business community, spurring more of a responsibility and accountability culture that requires businesses to take responsibility on and manage the impact on society of their and then the environment of their work. And SDGs are also a way to spur growth for businesses by turning global challenges into opportunities while making a positive impact, which in turn attracts investment dollars from increasingly ESG-centric investors. So let's see how companies are stacking up so far. This is a report that was done by MSCI back in 2020. So one way to track companies' progress on the ESG metrics is through their alignment on the SDGs. And so let me tell you how this one was measured. Companies were scored by either positive or negative contribution to each of the 17 goals. They looked at company policy, operation, products, services, and practices based on what was reported or publicly available information. It included just above 8,500 companies globally. So the companies were measured as either from strongly aligned all the way to strongly misaligned. In general, companies fell mostly in the middle. You can see that roughly 38% were aligned and 55% were either misaligned or neutral. And on the 2 extremes, you have very little, 0.2 and 0.8%, strongly aligned and strongly misaligned, respectively. Interestingly, of the 17 SDGs, the most cited by companies as targets are climate mitigation, goal 13, clean energy solutions, goal 7, and sustainable consumption and production, goal 12. Yet these 3 goals saw the highest degree of misalignment compared to the other SDGs. Goal 8, which targets economic advancement, employment, and decent work condition, had the highest degree of alignment. And also, interestingly enough, goal 12, one of the most strongly aligned goals was goal 12, responsible production and consumption, and it was also the most strongly misaligned. And that was driven primarily by reliance on fossil fuels. So what can companies do to be more aligned with the SDGs, especially goal 12? In my opinion, it's go circular. So we're going to talk about the circular economy. So the linear economy, which is our traditional economic model, which has served us very well, is take, make, waste. So we extract materials, produce products, consume, and then waste. Typically, things just end up going into a landfill. A paradigm shift from this traditional linear economy is a circular economy. It's an economic model that focuses on production and consumption that enables achieving the sustainable development goals by eliminating waste and pollution, keeping materials in use for as long as possible at the highest value, and regenerating nature. So basically, we're talking about produce, consume, reuse, repair, remanufacture, and as a very last resort, recycle. Recycling is actually a process of converting waste into reusable materials, and the intent of the circular economy is just to not produce waste to begin with. But recycling is certainly a better option than sending things to a landfill. So now it's important to note that circularity focuses on resource cycles and its processes. So while sustainability is more broadly related to people, planet, and the economy. So the circular economy is definitely a primary focus of organizations wanting to accelerate their sustainability efforts. So it's critical to holistically incorporate social and governance practices to achieve a sustainable circular business. And you can see from this chart over here that all the SDGs either directly benefit from or are enablers to to achieving sustainable circularity. So how do we get there? This is where the fun part is. The first thing is to understand the SDGs. There are 17 SDGs, 169 targets, and over 200 KPIs. So it's very important for any business to understand what each one of them are, because you may think that you're aligning to one SDG, but when you look at the KPIs, you're actually aligning to another one, or you may end up aligning to multiple ones. So determine how directly and indirectly related these SDGs are to your business, and then link the relevant target to business activities, whether it's circularity, climate action, governance, ethics, or development, or whatever it may be. And understand, it's critical to understand the resources and the data involved and needed for these measurements. And that's going to be important as we get into the next step, which is prioritizing. So need to prioritize, in order to prioritize the SDGs, need to identify targets that will have the biggest impact in terms of risk and opportunity. That's for the long term, the short term, and the medium term, short, medium, long. And then prioritize the targets where the business can proactively contribute to achieving progress. So it may be that the company is contributing to all 17, but given the resources and the time, you want to kind of choose where you're going to have the biggest impact. And if you happen to not be contributing to all 17, at best you can do no harm. So just be neutral on the ones that you're not contributing to. So things that you want to think about is, in which of the SDGs do you have the biggest possibility to contribute? Where can you utilize your core business to achieve the most impact? Where within this organization will this occur? Is it in the supply chain or maybe with consumers? And you want to do this exercise with a cross-functional team to encourage internal engagement and also ownership of the journey, and it also fosters innovation. So you start with the targets which create the largest impact, and of course then assess the maturity of the organizations to actually implement this plan. Next, you're going to set targets and plan. So link the chosen goals to the existing or new business targets and the KPIs. Evaluate new business opportunities and models and products or services that contribute to their goals. And then integrate the SDG with the business strategy throughout the entire value chain. Operationalize, which is the fun part. Link the SDG metrics to top management KPIs and incentives. And of course, engage all the employees, assign ownership across the entire organization for achieving the progress. Reporting is probably the most critical thing to keep in mind. Integrate the SDGs tracking and reporting into the core business reporting process. It needs to be as least cumbersome as possible so that it actually gets done and gets done properly. Ensure transparency to the various stakeholders. Reporting on the SDGs is important in communicating to stakeholders the company's commitment to contributing the goals. So showing the SDG branding in your annual report is always a plus. And financial data providers end up using this for their analysis. So if you're doing something in this sphere, publicize it. If you're not, then don't. So let's talk about the financial impact. So the business case for companies is pretty clear. So SDGs are becoming increasingly important to investors, especially as they start to invest based on their motivations. So this was a study that was done by Morgan Stanley. 84% of the respondents want to incorporate their personal values into their investing strategies. 86% believe that companies with ESG practices are more profitable. And in terms of making a positive impact, interestingly enough, plastic reduction and climate change were the two that were found to be the most interesting by investors. And plastic reduction, by the way, is one of the leading one of the leading agenda items for circularity. Between 2018 and 2020, ESG related assets, this is in the United States, reached 17 trillion, which is a growth of 42%. And globally, based on the Global Sustainable Investment Alliance report, it indicates that in the same time frame across 5 major markets, it was a 15%, reaching 35.3 trillion. So there's a graph here by MSCI that shows that companies that are considered ESG leaders actually outperform companies that are not. And companies that are not aligned with the SDGs are likely to experience increased scrutiny and risk losing capital, driven by increasing demand to invest in sustainable businesses. Financial impact on a business internally. So this right here links ESG initiatives to value drivers. I want to focus real quick on operating margin, cash tax rate, and cost of capital. So increased worker productivity so the ESG benefit is increased worker productivity through more purpose-driven culture, or increased cost efficiency by reducing waste. And if you end up not incorporating any ESG initiatives, you end up with higher employee turnover due to poor workplace culture and dissatisfaction, and raised disposal costs for excess waste. Keep in mind also for circularity, we want to eliminate waste. So that's a great one for circularity. Cash tax rate, tax credits, incentives, and tax advantaged financing help offset ESG investments, and as opposed to ending up in a higher effective tax rate if you don't incorporate it. And for the cost of capital, access to new sources of capital, sustainability financing instruments, for example, which I'm sure the other two guests will talk more about, and lower cost of capital through improved credit ratings. And if you end up not incorporating it, you have loss of limitation of capital resources and increased cost of capital due to poor sustainability ratings. One quick example that I want to give is this company. It's an apparel company that incorporated circular business practices into their business model and ended up with a $2 million benefit in 1 year. And what they did was they got incremental profit from take back program, greater customer loyalty and retention, lower cost of customer acquisition, and increase in favorable media exposure.
Okay. To 1 minute. One minute.
Headwinds and tailwinds. So we're talking about challenges and opportunities here. I'll just touch on workforce availability and readiness. So workforce upskilling and reskilling in green skills is needed to meet the demand of all the sustainability related goals that are roles that are coming up. External pressures, investors, stakeholders, society, unstable market conditions and legislation regulations will increasingly force businesses to pivot towards sustainable practices, and scrutiny is increasing as well. Partnerships and collaborations, we definitely need more industry and cross-functional collaboration to accelerate the transition to sustainabilities with impact. And one thing on the data and methodologies, I'll just say overall, is that it's inconsistent and could be fragmented, which ends up making comparing the results between companies a little bit challenging.
Okay, Najla, I love the fact that you ended on green skills, right? Yeah. So everybody, that's what we do, right? At GLEAC.
Yeah, I put that one in there for you.
So that was wonderful. So all of you who are here and you actually want to learn about our green skills offering, absolutely. Someone in chat maybe can share a link to our green skills program that we have going on, and I'm actually talking about this tomorrow. So excellent job, Najla. I would like to share before Federico starts. I actually want to ask a couple of questions. Najla, can you allow me to share? You stop sharing.
Sure.
let me share. Let me ask a couple of questions before I have Federico go on. So I'm going to ask a question to all of you. I'm going to have Tushar answer this first. In your experience, which segments or sectors are you seeing the greatest social impact orientation? And are you seeing any innovative modes or pathways emerge?
Yeah, in general, while there has been a little bit of a movement towards social impact orientation across sectors and driven in not just in part, but largely also by sort of more employee focus, etc. on these issues. A couple of sectors come to mind at a high level around when I think about which sectors of the greatest social impact orientation. One is of course healthcare, where anyway historically there has been substantial social impact orientation. What I've found to be really interesting, especially when I look at developing country context, and this maybe answers the second part of your question there, is that there's significant focus on that goes beyond large urban areas, and there's a lot more focus that we are actually seeing in rural areas. One of the models that I found work really especially well is the intersection of the skilling and livelihood sector with healthcare, where a number of large healthcare organizations have begun thinking about how do they really provide better access to healthcare, diagnostics, etc. in rural parts of developing markets. And the pathway that they found is that there typically are large populations of semi-skilled but highly motivated youth in rural parts of developing countries, and therefore we've seen large programs being launched by a number of healthcare providers where they look to actually train these youth in becoming entrepreneurs, either for providing access to healthcare products or also to services. An example of there is, for example, Essilor's iMitra program, of course, which focuses on eye care, where they have trained in India, for example, close to 5,000 youth in actually testing eyes and delivering eye care products. So entrepreneurship, which lies at through the intersection of skilling and healthcare, has been one sort of interesting and innovative mode or pathway that I've seen being adopted by that sector. I'll pause there. Maybe.
Yeah. And what about Federico and Najla? Do you want to jump in on this question? No? Federico, no?
To be honest, I come from the energy sector, and I have to say that the energy sector definitely doesn't fit into that criteria, unfortunately. But I would say probably, healthcare and also education. It's one sector that comes to mind, and in terms of innovative modes and pathways emerge, well, we are here all on GLEAC, so we see that there are a lot of ed tech that push the boundaries for education.
Perfect. Najla, what about you? Anything you want to add on here, or should I go to the next question?
I think we lost Najla.
Maybe she's coming back on. Okay, no problem. Let me ask the next question to the group. What are some of the key challenges, and then I'll have Federico go on. What are some of the key challenges that constrain greater investment of impact development capital in socially minded private enterprises? So Federico, I think this probably might be your suited to kind of what you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think that in this many times, first of all, there are a lot of companies and investors, banks that really want to try to have an impact and develop capital, putting capital into development companies that really have an impact. But sometimes many institutions struggle, and because I think that they struggle to meet that because they don't think creatively, and they are restrained. For example, like large banks, they are restrained by their own internal policies and understand where they come from. But I think that sometimes just their, for example, lending criteria just do not fit what's needed. And so I think that the capital is often there, but just doesn't manage to get channeled to the right companies and people, which could change, have a very significant impact just because of the usual security, the usual framework that they're used to.
Can you share a project that you really loved that came before you to fund that you weren't able to fund because they didn't meet the criteria?
Well, I think I think actually for example, the one topic that's very difficult to fund is the circular economy. So banks really, at least in my experience, they really struggle with the circular economy project because they see this very capital intensive project that costs millions of dollars, and they expect the same type of contracts and securities and structures in place. Well, this is just in the context, in the current context of the world, it's just not possible to achieve. So if they want fund, for example, waste projects, they look at them as if these are large infrastructure projects, and so they expect they put the same bar, but this is just not possible to achieve just because it works in a different way. And so it's very difficult for banks to fund this type of project in the way that the project needed.
And what about you, Tushar? What is your take on this?
Yeah, I think a couple of interesting. I would actually maybe want to piggyback on Federico's answer there as well. I think the point that he raised is really important, and then maybe to stretch that a little bit, it almost feels like the development sector and the private sector almost speak in two different languages. I've been part of so many conversations where there's a particular jargon or a particular language which is used by the development sector, and there's a very different language that is used by organizations in the private sector. And then at this point of time, what that typically leads to is either these two sectors really not talking directly to each other, or talking past each other. And a big gap that I believe exists in the ecosystem is just unavailability of good quality intermediation, where there's an intermediary like a banker or like any other kind of agent which is actually able to bring together projects that need support, that need capital, and then bring in the right kind of capital to actually support those projects. While that gap is slowly being filled, I think I see more and more organizations or intermediaries or bankers or whichever way you might look at it, agents essentially who understand and speak both kinds of languages. But in my mind, I think that is still a pretty small space. So this is one. I would just add maybe one more to this, which is around the unavailability, especially as you go into sort of smaller enterprises and you go towards sort of organizations which have just started up in difficult to reach areas in developing countries. There's just no data availability, and I think again that maybe ties in with Federico's point that the supply side or the capital providers don't have models at this point of time which help them evaluate these organizations for them to even be able to understand the risk of how to invest in these. So those are two which come to mind when.
Is there any particular project that you loved that you were not able to fund, Tushar?
So I mean, Dalberg, as you're aware, is more of a consulting firm, but I can indicate a project where we were working with funders and with actually an ecosystem of funders, and we were trying to catalyze funding. In that we were working with an ecosystem of funders, which included a number of large names. So not getting into specific names here, but they were basically looking to sort of build back better post-COVID, where they were looking to see if they could really fund small organizations which are part of their own supply chains. And these are organizations which are not immediate suppliers to them, but might be suppliers to their suppliers. So they're either tier 2 or tier 3 sort of suppliers to them. And they don't have direct relationships with these small organizations. And these small organizations have suffered quite a bit because of COVID, because of shutdowns. They did not have enough sort of cash balances, etc. And really needed access to capital. And the structures that were needed or that we actually recommended needed everyone to be a little bit more forward-leaning, to take a little bit more risk, to actually say that, look, we recognize that some proportion of small organizations might be risky, but a large number of them are not. And we needn't therefore treat the entire ecosystem as being non-credit worthy. However, we continue to push. We're continuing to work with a number of these clients, but we find that it is actually a really difficult barrier to cross. And the basic data piping that is required to really convince banks or large corporates to actually even fund organizations within their own supply chains does not exist in developing countries. So I think that was one that comes to mind.
Okay, lovely. Now, Federico, your presentation, 10 minutes. Let's go.
So let me share my screen.
Perfect.
Okay. So can everyone see it? Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
So
Perfect.
I'll skip some of the slides because Najla already has touched base on, but in my presentation, I'll focus on 3 SDGs. So 7, 9, and 13. I think they're all related to similar topics, so energy, infrastructure, and climate action. And the common thing that, or one of the common things that the common denominator is decarbonization. So decarbonization meaning reducing the CO2 emission of companies and individuals' activities. And basically, I mean, the end goal of this is well, to the as I said, the end goal of this is to achieve the SDG 13, so the fight climate change. So the what I want to say today is that there are a lot of actions, as Najla has shown, that and steps that companies can take in order to, focus on these SDGs and kind of like try to decarbonize their activities. And a lot of these activities actually can save money to companies. And when we think about the decarbonization, we think always to very expensive investment, but there are ways that actually can help companies achieve their pursuit to SDGs and decarbonization, at the same time save money to companies. And for me, save money is in this respect is same as unlocking funds, because if you don't spend money on one end, it means that you have more cash available on the other side that you can invest in your core business. The other thing that before we jump in the details that I want to say, and Najla has mentioned as well, is that there is a lot of funds available, and as we discussed, there are a lot of institutions that want to invest money towards the SDGs, and there are a lot of as well as products that these investment companies do. So, for example, from pension funds that invest equity to banks that want to provide loans and bonds and so on. So in my case, so I work for GLEAC Capital, which is a Dubai-based impact investor, and we focus on 2 verticals, so energy transition and circular economy. I'll focus today on the energy transition. It's more linked to decarbonization and easier to explain, but basically we invest via platform companies, and these platform companies, so our 2 main ones are called Siraj Power and Thakkar Solution, both Dubai-based. Basically, their goals is to both to help their clients, so other companies, save money and at the same time reduce the CO2 impact of their activities. In particular, Siraj Power, they develop, finance, design, build, and operate solar plants on the rooftop or carports of commercial industrial companies like factories, schools, warehouses. And the way it works, and the way Siraj works together with their clients, is that basically clients do not pay anything upfront. so Siraj Power goes and invests the money to install these solar panels, and then they have a contract where the client buys the electricity produced by these panels and for their own energy consumption. And basically, so this on one hand helps the company decarbonize their activities, because they, at least part of their energy would be clean instead of taken from the grid, which has a mix of fossil fuels and renewable energy. But at the same time, the clients save money from day one because they don't have to invest anything upfront. And at the same time, the price of the electricity sold from this rooftop, from these panels on the rooftop, is cheaper than what they buy from the grid, and it's a significant discount. So again, companies save money and they decarbonize their activity. And the same way Thakkar solution operates, but instead of solar panel, they do more broad energy efficiency measure, which means reducing their own energy consumption, for example, of buildings or industrial processing. And again, there is no, they don't ask any money upfront, but and then once their clients start saving money because of the reduced energy bills, basically they share this savings, so they take a cut of this savings. So these are just two examples of how companies can save money and so indirectly unlocking funds to invest in other activities. And as Najla said, there are a lot of other measures along these ones that are directly linked to clean energy and reducing energy consumption that can help companies become greener, but at the same time spending less money. For example, I have a friend that he works in a Swiss conglomerate, and he was saying how basically they changed the way that transport is done for client meetings and within the company. So first of all, they try to have more virtual meetings, but also they say if any meeting you can reach within 3 hours by train, you take a train instead of a plane, which is cheaper and cleaner. So again, measure that sometimes company can take and are achievable in the short term and help save money in the short term. And if we go into the specific, just to show a numerical example, so on the left is random company without solar panels on the roof, and on the right with the solar panels on the roof. And on the right, I show an example similar to Siraj, where the company do not pay the solar panels upfront. So let's say that their electricity bill is $200,000 a year with these panels, because the electricity produced from panels is potentially half the price of what they pay from the grid. They basically can save about $100,000 per year in electricity bills, which over 20 years can mean almost $2 million. And this it's equivalent every year to 640 tons of CO2. This is linked to Dubai. Every city has, or every country has its own equivalent, but then in Dubai would be equivalent to, taking out 200 cars out of the street every year. So I think that's it. That was my message, that there is a lot of funding and companies like GLEAC Capital and banks that can help do so. Sometimes, as I mentioned before, it's not always easy, as also Tushar has said, that there is difference in frameworks and way of speaking, understanding each other, but the funding is there, and the measures are there, and some can save
Okay.
money from day one.
Thank you so much, Federico. If you can stop sharing, I will start sharing, and I'm going to put you guys in a breakout room to solve an issue. Is Najla back? I know she messaged me. She's having internet issues. Is she back? If she's not, we'll put you in 2 breakout rooms.
Yeah, I think she's not here. She lost her.
Okay, so let's put it in 2. Let's go to 2 breakout rooms, and here is the challenge. All right. How can we build trust between philanthropic organizations and corporates so they are able to work together more to be able to catalyze significantly larger amounts of capital? Okay, we will copy and paste this in the breakout room. So one breakout room will have Federico, the other one will have Tushar. And this is a big thing, right? Because a lot of times we think about impact and we think NGOs. Immediately. That's when we hear NGOs. So how do we put those and corporates together, right? Because a lot of times, that's where you have the ideal combination. So they can work together to catalyze, significantly larger amounts of capital. So can we have 2 breakout rooms, please, for 5 minutes? Okay, so I'm dying to hear. Federico first, your group. What did you guys come up with?
So I think there were several or multiple interventions. I think they all were in the same direction, and I think that basically the idea is that the people within the organizations and different stakeholders and different parties and corporate and non-profit, for example, they need to have more conversations, further alignment, and basically come together and build more trust between themselves to find a path forward. So
all human skills, communication, collaboration. Hold on, I had to do a GLEAC trust. Right. Okay, and what about you, Tushar? What did your group come up with?
Yeah, lots of interesting ideas in 5 minutes there, and I think really sort of active group. There are 3 points that I'll highlight. I think the first one that came up was sort of building on the idea of building strong partnerships to maybe start tactically building partnerships with organizations that have already recognized the need and might already have made commitments there towards net zero, etc. And therefore focusing on funneling funds where needed and where basically preaching to the converted in some ways, and then building partnerships there. So starting from there, building models and then crowding other people in was idea number 1. The second one that came up was really around how do we was again sort of carrying on from the concept of the 2 sides speaking different languages. How do we create more opportunities for sharing learnings? How do we create opportunities of communities of practice? How do we create avenues for learning for both non-profits and corporate entities on both sides, so that they are able to understand each other and understand the models of engagement and instruments that could be utilized? And finally, how do we ensure transparency of data? Because mistrust is built up because someone somewhere did something wrong and got caught, right? So basically someone, if a corporate engages in greenwashing and does not really deliver on what it promises, then it reduces trust, but also creates challenges for everyone who else might actually be delivering real impact. And then those are the organizations which might not actually get the capital that they need. Therefore, how can transparency of data, how can things that are measured and tracked be clearly communicated? And how can that transparency be ensured in the ecosystem, especially in the ESG world? So
all of that in 5 minutes?
Yes, very active group. And team, do chime in if I did not, if I missed, and there were more ideas as well.
Yeah. So you know what, Tushar, you just experienced, the magic of the GLEAC community. That we all come in from all parts of the world, and everybody has a point of view on something. And I think that's the beauty of having a different point of view. So thank you for that wholeheartedly. So I'm going to now ask the question to everyone, and you're gonna respond in chat on this. Right now, if you had to choose low-hanging fruit of one SDG you can implement right away in your business, from 1 to 17. I'm sure if you can't remember what they are, hold on, let me pull up the slide for you so you understand all the SDGs. Hold on. Which one? I don't know if you can read it clearly. Maybe Federico has a clearer version of it. Do you have a clearer version, Federico, of all the SDGs for everyone?
No, I'm sorry.
I don't. Okay.
I only have my 3 ones.
Okay, so I'm going to assume everyone knows what the SDGs are. If you can, in chat, if you can implement one in your business right now, what would be your choice of SDG you can implement in your business right now? And all of us at GLEAC, let's answer that question also. Let's go. Let's see what SDG. Okay, there you are. Tushar put a link for us. Tushar, thank you. For all of us wearing glasses in the room. So one SDG that you can implement right now in your business. And it's pretty low hanging fruit. So you don't really have to do a lot and you can implement it in your business. I'm looking to see them in chat. Okay, Neha, SDG 5, gender equality. I'm going to butcher your name, Faradun, 17. Federico, 12. Partnership, Michelle, you recommend an investor. Okay, 17 partnership for goals, Lori. Any more that I'm seeing in there? So for GLEAC, it's equal opportunity, right? I would say we at MyShare are implementing 4. Hold on, Robert clearly is the rule breaker. I said 1, he put in 4 or 5. We know who's our rule breaker in the group. We love that about you, Robert. 4, 5, 11, 15, 16, 17. There you go. Tushar 5, gender equality. Wonderful, wonderful. So for all of you, I can certainly tell you, you know, I will wrap up on this note for GLEAC. You know, we really have been thinking about this a lot as an organization. You know, often people come to us and they ask us, you know, what is our, you know, as any startup, they come in and they go, what is your financial model? And I often say to them, I have a sliding scale model. And they go, well, what does that mean? And I said, because I also have an impact model. And sometimes in that impact model, I need to have a scale of how that works. And the team here at GLEAC will tell you, you know, I can proudly share with you today, of all days, we actually plugged in and we're powering the UNICEF YOMA platform. And, you know, we do many of these things, power, and we plug many, many platforms, and we purposely, with intention, sit and look and go, what are we impacting? Who are we impacting outside of our traditional, you know, business model of our investors going, I need you to return X, you know, and grow Y. There is the sliding scale. And I'm very conscious of that, right? And you have to do it with intentionality, I think, sometimes in your conversations, intentionality and OKRs, right? In terms of who are we powering, who are we plugging, why are we doing, what we're doing. And it's perfectly okay to be a solid, profitable, going to be a unicorn business, and also be very aligned to the SDGs and very aligned to impacting. It is absolutely possible, and it is absolutely possible to also be funded for that. You know, so I can proudly share to you, you know, on GLEAC's cap table, most of the funds and the investors have been impact investors or traditional investors who came to the table that would have never come to us because they noticed we had an impact side of what we're doing. And when you're very, very clear in your messaging of that, you're very, very clear in your measurement of that, it becomes really, really easy to get funding. So on that note, I would like to thank wholeheartedly Tushar and Federico and everyone here. So here's what we're going to do to Najla. Here's how we're going to let them know our appreciation. So this is going to be where Najla, you know, she's having a lot of internet issues. So normally we do hands, but tonight we're gonna do our GLEAC kisses. And this is how our GLEAC kisses work, right? So how well they do is how many kisses you're going to give them. So let's start now. For Tushar and Federico, how did they do tonight? And Najla, how did they do tonight, guys? Let's go. 1, 2, 3, go. There you go, guys. Thank you guys wholeheartedly for being here. It's an absolute pleasure and privilege. Thank you for all of you who have been on here for the past 2 hours. Like, it's been a great night of learning for all of this. Is what school should feel and look like, right?